what are practical steps to ignore doubts about the validity of actions in prayer? Simply ignoring doesn't work. Tamam. So when somebody asks a question like this, immediately I'm led to believe that this person might be suffering from waswasa. Waswasa is inexplicably a very widespread phenomenon in the modern era. I find more and more people asking about this, being affected by this, where shaitan comes and says to the person, your wudu is invalid, you didn't istinja properly, you didn't perform that raka'ah properly, you didn't recite that word properly. So shaitan, instead of allowing us to focus on what is important, he makes us obsessed, at obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD, he makes us obsessed with that which is practically irrelevant, right? On a technical level, these are important matters. Did you wash your arm properly? But shaitan makes you obsess over it to an unreasonable degree. And you find yourself being captured by shaitan within something that you can call a molehole, as opposed to giving your attention to the mountain, right? So you're focused on this little mole, this hole that the mole made, as opposed to focusing on this actual mountain that needs your attention. So instead of focusing on your relationship with Allah or staying away from haram, you are more worried about, did you perform istinja properly, or did you wipe yourself correctly, or are you clean enough? And this unfortunately is a widespread and growing disease that people are afflicted with. In terms of the modern world, the contemporary world, this is referred to as OCD. And because it's connected specifically to rituals, it is referred to as religious scrupulosity. From an Islamic perspective, a person suffering from this requires three things essentially. Number one, they need to understand the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who Allah is, right? The thoughts and the frame that they've made for Allah, or the way they think about Allah, is problematic, because deep down for them it is as though Allah is rejecting all of the ibadat, when in reality Allah is looking for an excuse to accept your ibadah. For them it is as though Allah wants to make it difficult for them to be worshipping Allah, when in reality Allah wants to make it easy. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. Yuridullah, Allah wants, bikum, for you, al-yusra, ease, wala yuridu bikum al-usra, and He doesn't want difficulty for you. So they need to work on their understanding of who Allah is and His mercy. Number two, they need professional help. Now, professional help for religious scrupulosity is twofold. There's the psychological, psychiatric aspect, which should be dealt with by a Muslim professional, because they need to understand the spiritual, religious, as well as psychological implications of this problem. So professional help is required. And then number three, the person needs to understand the basics of fiqh, where fiqh is helpful. And why do I say where fiqh is helpful? So if a person understands the ruling about what a person of this nature should do for matters that they doubt, then the fiqh can be helpful. But for a person who is pursuing the study of fiqh on their own, and they're looking for their own solutions and their own problem solving in these matters, fiqh can actually be destructive. To be clear, if a person suffers from waswasa and they stand there struggling with the niyyah for 10 minutes, trying to formulate the niyyah, fiqh would tell such a person, just start your salah in the simplest way possible. Have the intention of what salat is, fard salah of Maghrib, Allahu Akbar, and just continue, whether you are doubting your intention or not, you continue regardless. In fact, you must continue. So it's not that you're ignoring it and pushing forward. Then, okay, did I recite this verse in the Fatiha properly? It doesn't matter, because I suffer from waswasa, I'm only allowed to recite it once. And whether I doubt it or not, it's going to be valid because of my waswasa, and I move on to the next point. Same thing with wudu. Wherever the waswasa is afflicting you, you have to do what a quote-unquote normal person not suffering from waswasa would do in that moment. And because you suffer from waswasa, you are not allowed to repeat the action, not even once. So why is that different from a normal person? a normal, I'm just using this term because it's difficult to, on the spur of the moment, constantly bring up the correct terms to use. But by normal, I simply mean a person who does not suffer from waswasa in this sense. So anybody who does not suffer or face waswasa, they would normally repeat an action, right? If a person doubts whether they washed the limb of wudu, they would go back and wash that limb of wudu. If a person doubts whether they performed 3 raka'at or whether they performed 4 raka'at, they would have to assume they performed 3 and build on. Now, none of this applies to a person suffering from waswasa. A person suffering from waswasa would have to take the assumption that now I have in fact completed that 3rd raka'ah and now I'm in my 4th raka'ah, right? They would have to do this despite every part of their bodies and minds telling them to do the opposite. Otherwise, they'd be performing salah perpetually. And then, with the combined approach that we've mentioned, and there are some, free resources online as well, inshallah, Allah grant you afiyah. And don't forget that aspect also. Pray to Allah and ask Allah Ta'ala to cure this very difficult illness, spiritual illness, psychological illness that you face. May Allah protect us all. Ameen.
La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah.